The air in that Seattle ballroom was sterile. All glass and steel, smelling like expensive carpet and broken dreams. I was standing near the bar when Robert, my wife's lover, walked up to me. He didn't just look at me, he looked through me. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, and threw it. It hit my chest and fluttered to the polished marble floor. "Get yourself a real suit. Champ," he said, loud enough for the whole gala to hear. "I'll make sure Jennifer is well taken care of tonight." I didn't move. I just looked at my wife. Jennifer. She didn't defend me. She didn't look horrified. She laughed. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at Robert. And I didn't look at the $5 on the floor. I just turned and walked out of that glass tower. I walked past the valets, past the line of black luxury cars, and got into my old truck. The cab immediately filled with the smell of sawdust, walnut oil, and lacquer. My smell, the smell of the real world. I didn't rage. I didn't punch the dashboard. The anger wasn't hot and loud this time. It was cold. It was clinical. I pulled out my phone. I didn't look at photos. I didn't text anyone. I opened our joint bank account. My eyes scanned the ledger, and there it was. A transfer. Made just 2 hours ago. $25,000. Sent to an account I had never seen before. This wasn't a betrayal. This was accounting. My fingers didn't shake. I opened our savings. I transferred every remaining cent into my private business account. An account she couldn't touch. Then I went to the joint credit card portal and clicked Freeze All Cards. I reported them stolen. In a way, they were. I didn't drive to the house we shared. I drove to my workshop. It was just after 2 in the morning. I sat in the darkness. The massive, half-finished shape of a custom walnut desk looming in front of me. I made one call. A 24/7 emergency locksmith. I need every lock on my main house changed. Tonight? Yes. I'll pay the emergency fee. An hour later, I stood in the cold night air, sipping coffee from a thermos while a man I'd never met methodically drilled out the locks on my front door. The high-pitched whine of the drill was the only sound on the street. Jennifer was still at the gala, still laughing. I watched the old brass tumblers fall to the porch. And in that moment, I realized what this was. In my workshop, when I find rot in a beautiful $1,000 slab of walnut, I don't cry about it. I don't try to cover it up with putty and stain. That just poisons the whole piece. No. You have to make a clean break. You take a saw. You measure precisely. And you cut the diseased part away. It's a violent, painful-looking act. But it's not. It's the only way to save the rest of the piece. What I was doing. This wasn't revenge. This was preservation. I was cutting out the rot. The high-pitched whine of the drill stopped. The locksmith nodded at me. "All set," he said. "New keys?" He handed me the small, shiny piece of metal. I watched his truck pull away. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt the foundation under my feet. It wasn't love. It was solid. Hand-poured concrete. And it was all mine. You have to understand why that $5 bill felt less like an insult and more like a final invoice. It's because of my hands. They're rough. They're calloused. There are scars on my knuckles from a slipped chisel 10 years ago. And there's a fine layer of sawdust permanently etched into my fingerprints. I own Stonehaven Joinery. And I'm not a CEO. I'm a craftsman. My world, my sanctuary, is a 1,500-square-foot workshop behind the house. When I walk in, the first thing that hits me isn't a problem. It's a smell. It's the sharp, sweet tang of freshly cut walnut, the spicy resin of cedar, and the faint, clean smell of lacquer. It's the smell of substance. I take things that are raw. I take a rough-sawn slab of timber, something that was once a living tree, and I find it second life. I use my hands, my tools, my mind, and I transform it into something that will outlive me. A chairman's desk that feels like power. A dining table where a family will share stories for 80 years. A child's rocking horse. Built from the same plans my grandfather used. This is the dignity of the craftsman. I don't move numbers around on a screen. I don't leverage brand synergy or ideate in a vertical. I create tangible, lasting value. My work isn't just a job, it's a philosophy. You don't rush. You measure twice. You cut once. You respect the material. You can't lie to a piece of wood. It will split. It will warp. It will expose every shortcut you take. My work demands integrity. And Jennifer. She used to love that. When we first met, she said she fell in love with my hands. She loved the smell of sawdust on my clothes. She loved that I was real, that I wasn't like the slick, empty suits she worked with. But a PR job in the venture capital world, it changes you. It's a world of ideas, a world of glass towers like the one we were in tonight, filled with people who sold concepts, who built nothing but spreadsheets and broken dreams. And slowly, I became an embarrassment. It started small. Michael, can you please try to get that stain from under your fingernails before the dinner party? Then it was, maybe you sit this one out, it's just a boring work thing. Eventually, I became her plus none, the rustic, blue-collar husband who didn't fit her new, polished, venture capital-funded image. She was building strategic partnerships in rooms that smelled like expensive carpet. I was building heirlooms in a room that smelled like cedar. I wasn't just hidden. I was devalued. She still needed my rustic money, my joinery, the business she was embarrassed of. Paid the mortgage on our beautiful Seattle View home. It paid for the white BMW she drove. It paid for the designer clothes she wore to the parties I wasn't invited to. I was no longer her partner. I was her silent, invisible provider. And that's where the real sickness starts. I've read about it since. Psychologists have a word for it. A word that's more dangerous than anger or hate. The word is contempt. Contempt is the acid that dissolves a relationship from the inside out. It's the moment your partner stops seeing you as an equal and starts seeing you as an obstacle. Or worse, as an inferior. You're not a person to be respected. You're just the blue-collar guy who pays the bills. You're not a husband to be loved. You're a piece of old furniture that doesn't match the new decor. That's why she could laugh. When Robert threw that $5 bill, he wasn't just insulting me. He was giving voice to the contempt Jennifer had been feeling for years. He was just the first person to say it out loud. She wasn't laughing at the joke. She was laughing in relief. The secret she'd been carrying that she thought I was a worthless, embarrassing chump was finally out in the open. That's what I was thinking about. Sitting in my workshop at 3 in the morning, the betrayal wasn't the affair. The affair was just a symptom. The betrayal was the contempt. The sickness was realizing that the woman I'd spent 20 years building a life with looked at me and saw a $5 problem. And as the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and purple, I realized something. You can't fix contempt. You can't negotiate with it. You can't love it away. Just like rot. You have to cut it out. The sun was just starting to tint the Seattle sky with a cold, gray light. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee, sitting on my workbench, listening to the silence. My house, just 50 yards away, was a dark shape against the dawn. At 5:03 a.m., I heard her car, the familiar, arrogant purr of her white BMW's engine. I watched through the workshop window as she parked, not even trying to be quiet. She stumbled slightly, her heels clicking on the driveway. She walked to the front door, pulling the keys from her purse. I waited. First came the sound of the key sliding into the lock. Then, a scrape, a jiggle, a harder scrape. She tried again, shoving the key with more force. Nothing. I heard a muffled curse. She tried her house key again. Then the back door key. More scraping. More useless rattling. The silence that followed was heavy. Her confusion was turning into rage. I heard her footsteps on the gravel path that led to my workshop. Then, the banging. It wasn't a knock. It was a full-fisted, entitled pounding on the heavy, solid oak door. "Michael," she yelled. "Michael, what the hell is this? Open this door." I set my coffee mug down. I walked over and pulled the heavy door open. She recoiled, momentarily blinded by the bright workshop light behind me. She was a wreck. Her expensive gala dress was wrinkled. Her makeup was smeared into a grotesque mask. And her hair was a mess. She looked at me, and there was zero shame in her eyes. Only pure, undiluted fury. "What did you do?" she spat. "My key isn't working." I just looked at her. My hands were clean, but I could smell the faint, sharp scent of cedar from the cabinet I'd been sanding yesterday. "Your key doesn't work," I repeated, my voice flat. I see that she shrieked. "Why, this is my house. Michael, you can't just lock me out. Let me in." She actually tried to push past me. I didn't move. I just stood there, solid as the 4-inch thick door frame. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 20 years. The mother of my children, the woman who had laughed as another man threw $5 at my chest. "Neither does our marriage," I said, and I closed the door. The solid thud of the heavy oak meeting the frame was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. The pounding started again. Harder this time, mixed with screaming. I ignored it. I walked back to my workbench, picked up my coffee, and watched my phone. It lit up. Almost instantly, the first text, from Jennifer, "You're insane. Let me back into my house right now." I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear. The second text, "I'm calling the police." "Michael, this is illegal. You can't do this." I took a sip of coffee. The third text, "You are overreacting. It was a joke. Robert was just kidding. You're blowing this all completely out of proportion." The fourth text, "After everything I do for this family, after all the networking I do to keep us in the right circles, this is how you treat me. How dare you?" And then, the one that confirmed everything. The one that proved the rot was deeper than I could have ever imagined. The fifth text, "You've created a mess. Michael, Robert is furious. He's talking about filing a complaint against you for threatening him. You need to call me and fix this. Immediately." I read that last text twice. I needed to fix her mess. He didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt calm. The kind of cold, clear-headed calm you get when you've finally seen the truth and you know exactly what to do next. I held my thumb over her contact. I pressed block. The pounding outside finally stopped. I heard her car door slam, the engine roar, and the sound of tires squealing out of the driveway. I finished my coffee. I went inside my small workshop bathroom, showered, and put on a clean work shirt and my good jeans. I wasn't in my workshop. I was in a sharp, quiet office downtown, the kind that smelled like old books and expensive coffee. Across the desk sat James, my lawyer for 15 years. James was a man in his late 60s who wore immaculate suits and never, ever raised his voice. He wasn't a fighter, he was a finisher. Next to him was a woman I'd just met, Emily. She was a forensic accountant James had recommended. She was in her 30s, wore sharp rectangular glasses, and had an energy that suggested she survived entirely on caffeine and finding other people's mistakes. She had her laptop open, and her fingers were already flying. "She's having an affair," I said, keeping my voice level. "But that's not why I'm here." I pushed a printout of my bank statement across the desk, the one showing the $25,000 transfer. "I found this last night," I said. "I've frozen all our joint assets. I'm filing for divorce. I want to know where every single cent went. I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg." James looked at the paper, then at me. He nodded slowly. "Good. Infidelity is messy. Theft is clean. We can work with theft." Emily, the accountant, didn't even look up from her screen. I took the liberty of running a preliminary check when James called me this morning. She said. Her voice was crisp. "This isn't an iceberg. Mikhail, this is a whole polar ice cap. She's been busy." She turned her laptop around. "This isn't just an affair. This is a pattern, a system." I looked at the rows of numbers, the transfers, the hidden accounts. My stomach tightened, but I didn't let it show. "I don't want to destroy her," I said, my voice cold. "I want to protect my children. I want to protect my business. And I want to protect what I've built." I looked at Emily. "Find it. Find everything. She gave me a thin, satisfied smile. Oh, I will. James picked up his desk phone. I'll have her served at her office, he said. This afternoon, it's better that way. More professional. I nodded, stood up, and shook their hands. I walked out of that quiet office and into the bright morning sunlight. I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel angry. I felt like a man who was finally, after 20 years, respecting his own material. The war wasn't over, but it had just moved from a messy domestic dispute to a clean, professional, and very, very precise operation. I didn't go back to the workshop just to hide. I went back because when the world stops making sense, my work is the only thing that does. James Melavier was moving. He had Jennifer served at her high-rise VC office. I can only imagine the humiliation as a process server walked into that sterile, glass-walled lobby and handed her the divorce papers in front of her colleagues. Good. I was in the middle of shaping a piece of cherry wood, the curved leg of a new armchair, when my phone rang. The screen read Emily, Forensic Accounting. I wiped the sawdust from my hands, took a deep breath, and answered, Michael. Michael, I'm in, she said. No preamble, no small talk. I already liked her. I'm inside your joint accounts, your business accounts, and the new credit cards Jennifer opened in her name 6 months ago that you didn't know about. I stopped my lathe. Go on. The $25,000 transfer from the gala was just the exit fee, she said, her voice crisp and cold. She's been bleeding you dry for over a year. The total I've found so far, $150,000. The number just hung in the air. $150,000. That's not just money. That's 2 years of my kids' college tuition. That's the down payment I made on this very workshop. Do you know how many slabs of black walnut that is? How many hours I've stood over that lathe until my back felt like it was going to snap in two? That's not just money. That's time. That's sweat. That's the part of my life I can never get back. And she took it. Where did it go? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Hotels, shopping. Was it all for him? That's the part you're not going to like. Emily said, I thought it was an affair. Too. It is. But that's not where the money went. Michael, she wasn't funding a lover. She was funding an addiction. What? It's all wire transfers. Dozens and dozens of them. From 3 different accounts. All routed to offshore online casinos. Poker sites. High stakes, virtual blackjack. She's a gambler. Michael. A massive one. And she's been liquidating your assets to cover her debts. I leaned against the workbench. She'd been so desperate, so deep in a hole, that she looked at the life we'd built, the legacy for our children, and saw it as nothing but a pile of chips. I wasn't her husband. I was her bank, and I was being foreclosed on. Okay, I said. Okay. What about Robert Thie? The other guy. That's the other interesting part, Emily said. I could hear her typing. The $25,000 was for the gambling, but I found other, smaller, more consistent transfers. These were going to him, not directly, but to an LLC, Fintech Solutions LLC, registered to a Robert. So she was paying him. Too, I said, my stomach twisting. No, that's not what I'm seeing, Emily said, and I heard her pause. The transfers to his LLC are small, but I'm seeing regular deposits. Into his personal account. Very regular. Looks like payroll. Payroll. From who? A company called Fintech Solutions LLC. Emily said, Wait. That can't be right. Hold on. Michael. I'm cross-referencing your corporate structure right now. Your main company. Stonehaven. Joinery. You have a few subsidiary holdings. An investment arm. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze. Emily, I said, cutting her off. What's the name of the subsidiary? It's Fintech Solutions LLC. Michael, Are you telling me? I bought it 3 years ago, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was a small tech startup. I kept the management team in place. I never go there. A long, heavy silence stretched over the phone. Michael, Emily said. He's your employee. Robert, the man from the party. He's been on your payroll for 3 years. Salary, $140,000 a year. I hung up the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I started to laugh. It was a quiet, cold, terrible laugh that echoed in the high-ceilinged workshop. The man who threw $5 at me cashes my paycheck. The man who said he'd take care of my wife has been living off my company for 3 years. The man who looked at me with such utter contempt, like I was something you scrape off the bottom of your shoe. He reports to me. And this whole time, neither of them knew. Jennifer, my wife, had so much contempt for my little workshop, so much disdain for my blue-collar job, that she never once bothered to look at the corporate structure. She never bothered to see that the rustic artisan she was embarrassed by was the silent owner of the innovative fintech firm her lover worked for. They saw me as so small, so irrelevant, so stupid. They didn't even know who I was. All those years, she was ashamed of my sawdust. But she had no problem letting her lover take a 6-figure salary from the very empire I built with it. The anger was gone. It had been burned away, leaving something pure and hard in its place. Clarity. I picked up my phone. I didn't call James. I didn't call Jennifer. I called my other office, the one at the subsidiary. My assistant, Sarah, picked up Stonehaven Holdings. This is Sarah. Sarah. It's Michael, I said. Her voice immediately snapped to attention. Mr. Stone, sir. How are you? I'm fine. Sarah. Listen. I need you to clear my schedule tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'm calling a mandatory all-hands-on-deck meeting for the entire senior management team. Oh, of course. See, is there an agenda I should send out? Just call it a strategic review, I said. And Sarah, make sure everyone is there, especially Mr. Robert. Robert. From marketing. That's the one. He'll be there. See. I know he will, I said, and hung up. I walked over to the half-finished cherrywood armchair. I picked up my chisel, my hand perfectly steady. Tomorrow was going to be a very, very busy day. Tomorrow was Robert's performance review. I walked into the FinTech Solutions office at 10 a.m. on the dot. It was exactly as I remembered it from my one and only tour, all glass. Gray carpet, and a faint smell of burnt coffee and desperation. People I employed, but didn't know, looked up from their cubicles, their eyes wide. I was the ghost owner, the man who never showed up, my assistant. Sarah met me at the door, visibly nervous. Mr. Stone. They're all waiting in the main conference room. Thank you, Sarah, I said. I walked in. The senior management team, 6 people in suits who looked like they lived on airplanes and bad salads, were seated around a long, sterile table. And then I saw him. Robert. He was at the far end of the table, sipping an espresso, looking tan and confident in a suit that probably cost $4,000. He was laughing at something the VP of sales said. He looked up as I entered, and his laugh just died. His face. I will never forget that look. It was a slow-motion car crash of emotions. First, confusion. Then, a flicker of recognition. Then, dawning, stomach-dropping horror. He looked like a man who had just seen his own obituary. He knew my face, but he couldn't compute why I was standing at the head of his conference table. I just smiled, a small, tight smile. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I sat down. For 20 minutes, I went through the motions. I asked about quarterly projections, new client acquisitions, market synergy, all the buzzwords they love. I let them talk, watching Robert out of the corner of my eye. He was sweating. He hadn't said a word, and he was visibly pale, his hands shaking under the table. Finally, I closed my folder. That's all for the projections. Just one last piece of business. The room was silent. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a crumpled, worn, $5 bill. I unfolded it and slid it down the long, polished table. It glided perfectly, like a shuffleboard puck, and came to a stop right in front of Robert's trembling hands. I believe, I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, that this is yours. The VP of sales looked confused. Robert looked like he was going to be sick. I leaned forward. I was told it was to help me get a real suit, but I'm afraid the fit is a little off. I looked directly into his eyes. Robert, you're fired. Effective immediately. You can't. He stammered, his voice a high-pitched squeak. You're nobody. I'm Michael, I said, owner of Stonehaven Holdings, the parent company of this firm, the man who has been signing your $140,000 paychecks for 3 years, the man whose wife you were taking care of. The blood drained from every face at that table. Consider the $5 your severance, I said. Sarah has already called security. They'll escort you out. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. 2 security guards I'd hired for the occasion walked in. They took him by the elbows. As they dragged him from the room, he was still just staring at the $5 bill on the table. A week later, Jennifer showed up. Not at the house. She knew better. She showed up at my workshop. In the middle of the day, she wasn't the polished VC woman from the gala. She was the woman from the driveway. But worse, her hair was stringy. Her eyes were red and puffy. And she was wearing sweatpants. She looked broken. She banged on the oak door. I opened it, holding a sanding block, a fine layer of cedar dust coating my arms. Michael, thank God, she sobbed, rushing forward. What do you want? Jennifer, you have to stop this, she pleaded, her hands twisting. James, your lawyer. He sent me these. Criminal charges, dissipation of assets, Michael. The gambling. I had a problem. I know. But this will ruin me. They'll arrest me. You stole $150,000, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. You gambled away our children's future. I'll pay it back, I swear, she cried. Just call him off, please. Think of the kids. What will they do if their mother? If I go to... I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no love, no pity. Just empty. I am thinking of the kids. Jennifer, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the chisel on my workbench. I'm making sure they have a future. Since you tried to gamble it away, I stepped back inside and closed the heavy, solid oak door. The thud final. I heard her scream my name, but it was just noise. I went back to work. The divorce was exactly what James said. It would be clean, not messy. Criminal fraud and documented dissipation of marital assets take all the guesswork out of a divorce. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd heard every lie in the book, didn't even blink. Michael gets the house. Michael gets full, unencumbered ownership of Stonehaven Joinery and all its subsidiaries. Michael gets full, sole legal and physical custody of all 4 children. Jennifer's lawyer, a man who looked like he was being paid in gift cards, finally spoke up. Your Honor, what about the division of marital vehicles? The judge looked down at her papers. Mrs. Stone is awarded one 2006 Dodge Caravan. With 200,000 miles, she looked up. I believe Mr. Stone was planning to donate it to a youth center, but it is a marital asset. So, it is hers. 6 months passed. It was spring. My workshop was thriving. The story had gotten out. My business tripled. Turns out, people like buying things from a man who refuses to be broken. Ethan, my oldest, had deferred trade school for a year. He was working with me in the shop. He had my hands and a mind for the work. We were finishing the first piece of a new line, the Artisan's Legacy series. It was a chairman's desk, made of a single, spectacular slab of black walnut. "Dad," Ethan said, "I think it's ready." I nodded. I picked up a small, inlaid brass plaque I'd forged myself. Together, we affixed it to the inner drawer. It was a small detail, something only the owner would see. It had 3 words. Integrity is the only currency. That night, I was at home. My home. The kids were inside, arguing over movie night. I was on the back patio, sitting in front of the stone fire pit I'd built with my own hand. I went into my office. The $5 bill was in a simple black frame on my desk. I'd kept it as a reminder. I took it out of the frame. I walked back outside to the fire pit. The kids now laughing about something. I crumpled the $5 bill in my hand. I tossed it onto the kindling. It caught fire instantly, turning black at the edges. The face of Lincoln curling into ash before being carried up into the clear. Cold. Spring night. I sat back, felt the warmth on my face, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt truly, completely solvent. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.